Hello, Mind Mappers, and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over The Willpower Instinct by McGonigal, PhD, how self-control works, why it matters, and what you can do to get more of it. After reading this book, I've come to believe that willpower is the base skill that we can learn to make all of our other skills in personal development more valuable. I believe that this book gives us a great overview of what we can expect when we're trying to make a change. There's a ton of great insight in here about scientific studies, but more importantly, there's a lot of actions that you can take to make willpower easier to access and make it so that you need to use less of it. With that, we'll get directly into the introduction. I pulled a quote from the book that I think gives us a good overview of what we can expect to learn. She says, "We may all have been born with the capacity for willpower, but some of us use it more than others. People who have better control over their attentions, emotions, and actions are better off in any way that you look at it. They are happier and healthier, their relationships are more satisfying and last longer, they make more money and go further in their careers. They are better able to manage their stress, deal with conflict, and overcome adversity. They live longer. When pit against other virtues, willpower comes out on top." That's what I was talking about, is this is kind of the base skill that makes everything else in your life a little easier. Self-control is a better predictor of academic success than intelligence, a stronger determinant of effective leadership than charisma, and more important for marital bliss than empathy. If we want to improve our lives, willpower is not a bad place to start. So really what I wanted to take from this and what we can take from this entire book is if we want to improve our life, we should start with willpower. Probably the single most important skill for us to learn is just how to allocate and use our willpower. If you're trying to build a business, strategy only takes you so far. Hard work and commitment are almost always required. If you're trying to get in shape, the perfect diet plan or exercise plan doesn't work so well if you don't have the ability to follow it. And that's what willpower is. And these are just some of the more obvious ways that willpower impacts our lives. Reality is that our entire lives are dictated by our use or non-use of willpower. Small everyday things like not getting into arguments, getting out of bed, and paying attention to YouTube videos all require some amount of willpower. So what are we going to learn in this book? Well, we're going to learn how willpower really works. And I said before that I think it's counterintuitive. And I think that a large part of what we've been taught and what we kind of intuit about willpower is actually wrong. So we're going to dispel some of those myths and replace it with a little bit of truth. We're also going to learn strategies to increase our willpower, which of course we could always use a little bit more. And we're going to learn the one thing that you think about willpower that is wrong. One very specific thing that I think almost everyone believes willpower that is just straight up wrong. We can expect that in this video. A little bit about mind mapping before we get into it. You can get the most out of these mind maps by following along. All of the mind maps, including this one, are available at the link down below that you can follow along with. And following along with the mind maps, of course, is going to help you learn more, remember better, and apply these books to your life. We're trying to apply these books to our lives rather than just take in the information. Our first big idea is training. The quote goes like this: "There is a growing scientific evidence that you can train your brain to be better at self-control." What does willpower training for your brain look like, you might be asking? Neuroscientists have discovered that when you ask the brain to meditate, it gets better not just at meditating, but at a wide range of self-control skills, including attention, focus, stress management, impulse control, and self-awareness. People who meditate regularly aren't just better at those things, aren't just better at meditating and impulse control and focus. Over time, their brains become finely tuned willpower machines. Regular meditators who have more gray matter in their prefrontal cortex, so they've actually made these real physical changes to their brain, as well as regions of the brain that support self-awareness. So they actually grow gray matter in their brains in the places that are going to help you with willpower and self-awareness. So if we were going to design a willpower training camp, what might that look like? Well, first of all, it looks like meditation. Meditation would be a big part of your training program if you were to do a willpower boot camp. There's some amazing science on the power of meditation to almost instantly increase your willpower. Here are a couple different studies from the book. After 11 hours, researchers could see that those changes in the brain. The new meditators had increased neural connections between regions of their brain important for staying focused, ignoring distractions, and controlling impulses. Another study found that 8 weeks of daily meditation practice led to increased self awareness in everyday life, as well as increased gray matter in corresponding areas of the brain. I think you're going to hear a lot more about self awareness in this willpower video than you might think. Having willpower is actually, in large part, having self awareness. It may seem incredible that our brains can reshape themselves so quickly, but meditation increases blood flow to the prefrontal cortex in much the same way that lifting weights increases blood flow to your muscles. The brain appears to adapt to exercise in the same way that muscles do, getting both bigger and faster in order to get better at what you ask it to do. So, meditation is really kind of lifting weights for the brain. Meditation, of course, has some amazing in the moment benefits, just like exercise, right? Exercise increases your energy, it decreases your stress, gives you a clear mind. They're all great places to start. But I think the real important thing here is that the studies show long lasting effects and they are pretty insane. A small amount of meditation makes your life a heck of a lot better, and I definitely know that firsthand. So, what are we waiting for? From Willpower by Roy Baumeister, we learned that almost any type of meditation or prayer will increase our willpower. I recommend that you check out that book. If you're interested in the Willpower Instinct, you'll love Willpower by Roy Baumeister. It's available on this channel as well. This is one of the things that I recommend for meditation beginners. If you don't have a meditation practice already, this is a surefire way to get one rolling. Step number 1, brew your warm drink in the morning. For me, it's coffee or tea, and I almost never miss it. I stole this idea from Atomic Habits by James Clear. I put my meditation habit on top of a habit that I would almost never normally miss. Step number 2 is I sit down on my couch and enjoy that drink. And a lot of other people are doing this now too. I'm getting a ton of emails and comments about it. You can sit down, no distractions, constantly and consistently. Bring your attention back to the delicious drink. Meditation, we want a singular object of focus to allow our thoughts to kind of bubble up, but bring our attention back. And that's kind of the act of willpower in motion right there. Step number 3, of course, as always, is whoops, you're meditating. Welcome to Willpower Land. So we've got our first kind of piece of the training camp for our Willpower Boot Camp. Pause and plan is our next big idea, and it connects to this meditation point. Susan, a psychologist at the University of Kentucky, studies how states of mind like stress and hope influence the body. She has found that, just like stress, self-control has a biological signature. The need for self-control sets into motion a coordinated set of changes in the brain and body that help you resist temptation and override self-destructive urges. So self-control sets in motion this coordinated pieces of change that are going on in your mind that allow you to resist the temptation and override these urges that we sometimes feel. She calls those changes pause and plan response, the pause and plan response, which couldn't look more different from the fight or flight response. So this is really fight or flight response turned on its head. Of course, that opposite is pause and plan. We've all been in the fight or flight mode before. Something stresses us out at work or at home, and suddenly we can't think straight. Our heart is pounding and our breathing rate is fast and shallow. That's the fight or flight response, which is not where willpower lives. In fact, it's very hard to have willpower when you're in this fight and flight response. However, pause and plan is what response would necessitate willpower. It would make willpower possible, so to speak. Here's what it would look like from Kelly. Your brain needs to bring your body on board with your goals and put the brakes on your impulses. To do this, your prefrontal cortex will communicate the need for self-control to lower brain regions that regulate your heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, and other autonomic functions. The pause and plan response drives you in the opposite direction of the fight or flight response. Instead of speeding up, your heart slows down and your blood pressure stays normal. Instead of hyperventilating like a madman, you take a deep breath. Instead of tensing muscles to prime them for action, your body relaxes a little bit more. And I think When we read this over, we might think, oh, my blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up, I start hyperventilating. It it doesn't always manifest in such a way that we can notice it, right? A small underlying low level response to stress is still higher blood pressure, is still heart rate going up, is still hyperventilating, but it might not bubble up so that you are forced to notice it. Just keep that in mind. You might be stressed out and in that fight or flight response and not notice it right away. So, how do we shift from fight or flight to pause and plan? Well, meditation, of course, is that great place to start. Building up those muscles of awareness and detachment is important. That keeps us in the pause and plan response and out of the fight and flight response long term. But coming up next, we've got a great in the moment hack for calming the mind and moving more into the pause and plan rather than fight or flight. Even just keeping pause and plan in mind, I've found very, very helpful over the last few days. Pause and plan instead of fight and flight. Our first big idea in orange here, which I think is one of the most important ideas of the entire book, is breathe. You won't find many quick fixes in this book, but there is one way to immediately boost your willpower. Slow your breathing down to 4 to 6 breaths per minute. That's 10 to 15 seconds per breath. Slower than you would normally breathe, but not difficult with a little bit of practice and patience. Slowing down the breath activates the prefrontal cortex. We keep bringing that up and increases heart rate variability. So that's not heart rate, it's heart rate variability. Basically, the space between your heartbeats is a little bit varied rather than the same each time. It's a very good indicator of whether you're stressed or not, which helps shift the brain and body from a state of stress to self-control mode. A few minutes of this technique will make you feel calm, in control, and capable of handling cravings or challenges. So if we want an immediate path to willpower in the moment, maybe we find ourselves in the fight or flight response, trying to not give in to a temptation, this is what we would do. Take some time to breathe. And we want to slow it down. So 10 to 15 seconds per breath is definitely the sweet spot. And that means about 4 to 6 seconds in and out for 6 to 8 seconds. Test it right now. Notice the immediate calming response. It's pretty cool, right? And I also think that this breathing technique connects perfectly with something we've talked about in other books like Rethinking Positive Thinking and some of the other procrastination-based books that we've done over the past couple weeks on the channel. It connects perfectly with if-then statements from the other books. If-then statement allows us to choose how we'll react in a situation before we're forced to react. So this is kind of playing offense instead of playing defense when it comes to this fight or flight response and this willpower response. They're extremely helpful because it's often hard to respond effectively when you're already in fight or flight mode. Here's an example of how you could use the if-then statement for your breathing when you feel in the stressed mode. So you would say, if I feel stressed at work before a presentation, then I will step outside and do 2 minutes of the slow breathing that we talked about before. So you know that as soon as you get into the stressed mode, instead of doing what you would normally do to react, whether it's eating something you shouldn't be eating, whether it's surfing social media, whether it's lashing out at your boss or whatever it might be, instead of doing that response, know that taking the breaths might be the correct response. And plan to do that ahead of time. I think that's the big point here. A couple other books that I recommend that you check out is Rethinking Positive Thinking by Gabrielle Oettingen, available on the channel. Willpower by Roy Baumeister, available on the channel again. And then Solving the Procrastination Puzzle, which of course is available on the channel. With that, we're going to move into our next big idea, which is drug, ? Exercise turns out to be the closest thing to a wonder drug that self-control scientists have discovered. For starters, the willpower benefits of exercise are immediate, kind of like the meditation we talked about before. 15 minutes on a treadmill reduces your cravings, as seen when researchers try to tempt dieters with chocolate and smokers with cigarettes. The long-term effects of exercise are even more impressive. It not only relieves ordinary everyday stress, but it's a powerful antidepressant, as Prozac. Working out also enhances the biology of self-control by increasing baseline heart rate variability and training the brain. When neuroscientists have peered inside the brains of new exercisers, they have seen increases in both gray matter, brain cells, and white matter, the insulation on brain cells that helps them communicate quickly and effectively with each other. So we're seeing that in order to gain willpower, we want to do these things that are actually going to make real solid changes to our brain. Physical exercise, like meditation, makes your brain bigger and faster, and the prefrontal cortex shows the largest training effect. Who would have thought? You think exercise is for slimming, you think exercise is for making your muscles stronger and making you look better naked, whatever it might be, but exercise actually increases your willpower. So, how much do we have to exercise? Well, Elrod tells us in his book, The Miracle Morning, that it really doesn't take that much. You can start with what you can do: a 5-minute walk, 20 squats, and some push ups. That's a perfect place to start. There are no shortage of amazing things that exercise can do for us, but knowing that putting a little bit of willpower into the bucket of exercise actually makes all our other big buckets bigger is nice. So if we exercise a little bit in the morning, we're going to be able to be more focused at work, we're going to be able to be more present in our relationships, and we're going to have more likelihood of sticking to whatever kind of eating plan we've decided to follow. So this isn't only have so much willpower game, right? We've talked about this a little bit before on other videos, but people believe they only have so much willpower available to them in a day. And what we're finding now with exercise and meditation is that spending a little bit of willpower in the right places actually gives you more willpower to use. So coaching clients that I work with who are hard charging business owners often use this as an excuse not to exercise. I don't have the time to exercise, or I'm burned out by the end of the day. All basically excuses for I don't have the willpower to do it, and I want to use my willpower in a different way. I want to use my willpower with my business or whatever it might be going on in my life. This is obviously somewhat true. It does take some willpower to get it done, especially in the beginning. But it's a counterintuitive point about willpower. Some things that take willpower actually build it. Put a small amount of exercise into your daily routine, and you'll be thankful, not only because you'll be in better shape, but you'll have more willpower for the things that really matter. Our next orange point, which I think is the second most important point in the entire book, is build. Other studies have found that committing to any small, consistent act of self-control, improving your posture, squeezing a hand grip, cutting back on sweets, and keeping track of your spending can increase your overall willpower. And while these seem small self-control exercises may seem inconsequential, squeezing a hand grip, improving your posture might not make an effect on your life right away, they appear to improve the willpower challenges we care about most, including focusing at work, taking good care of our health, resisting temptation, and feeling more in control of our emotions. So it's not just meditation and exercise that increases our willpower when we put it in, but any small act. If we want to build our willpower, we need to find small, meaningful, and non-depriving ways that are challenging to our willpower. It's kind of like flexing the muscle. It's such a key point, right? So not just exercise, not just meditation, not just breathing train our willpower muscles, but of course, so does using them. It's not just about building stronger willpower muscles as we might normally think, and as the metaphor is going, it's really about the habit of noticing what you are about to do and choosing to do the more difficult thing instead of the easiest. So I talked about self-awareness beforehand, and that's really where it comes in, is right at the very beginning. You need to notice what you are about to do and choosing to do the more difficult thing instead of the easiest. Through each of these willpower exercises, the brain gets used to pausing before acting. The triviality of the assignments may actually help this process. So flossing your teeth, doing these small little willpower things actually might make it better for training. The tasks are challenging but not overwhelming. And while the self-restraints require careful attention, they're unlikely to trigger strong feelings of deprivation. We want to make sure that we're not feeling deprivation when we're kind of flexing our willpower muscles. The relative unimportance of the willpower challenges allowed participants to exercise the muscles of self-control without the internal angst that derails so many of our attempts to change. So you want to practice your willpower on something that doesn't feel depriving, something that doesn't feel super difficult. It's a little difficult, it's a little challenging, but it's not past your capability and it doesn't make you feel deprived. And if you can train yourself on those things, it's going to make the bigger things a little easier. Noticing what you're about to do and doing the more difficult thing instead of sticking to the easy things. What she's saying here is how you do one thing is how you do everything. Constantly choosing the easy path, how can you expect yourself to do the hard things when they're required? If you can't floss your teeth, have good posture, exercise for 5 minutes a day, how can you expect yourself to build a successful business? How about you? What are your small commitments? Here's some examples from my own life. I find a nighttime routine. Find a nighttime routine that you follow every single day and stick to it. Focus on having good posture during the day, whether you're at a sitting desk, a standing desk, or outside. Keep a list of everything you need to do in a particular day and make sure that you're checking it off as it gets done. That's my personal favorite, although I do the other two. Writing down a list of things and checking them off is such a willpower hack. Next, we're going to talk about the long-term shift. And this might be my dark horse for my favorite point from the entire book. I didn't highlight it, but I do believe that this is a very important point. Aim to reduce the variability of your behavior day to day. View every choice you make as a commitment to all future choices. So instead of asking, do I want to eat this candy bar now? Ask yourself, do I want the consequences of eating a candy bar every afternoon for the next year? Or if you've been putting something off that you know you should do, instead of asking, would I rather do this today or tomorrow? Ask yourself, do I really want to put up with the consequences of always putting this off? So I love this idea. Instead of what you're feeling in the moment, trying to shift it to tomorrow, or oh, I'll just do it today and it's no big deal if I just don't do it today, try to shift to the long-term consequences of any action. Because we all know we don't just eat the candy bar the one day. It happens the one day, the next day is a little easier, the next day is a little easier, of course, right? And I think this is another great point for an if-then statement. If I find myself thinking of eating a candy bar, I will remind myself of the long-term consequences to my body. If I find myself procrastinating on something, I will remind myself of the consequences of being a procrastinator, a chronic procrastinator. Don't act like you're just going to do it today, because we all know that that's not really true. It's a powerful reframe for the mind. It doesn't allow you to get away with what you've been letting yourself get away with. Generally, I think our minds are looking at the good in every decision instead of the bad. The candy bar looks delicious, and we don't think about the extra 10 or 20 pounds a candy bar habit a day puts on us. Netflix is entertaining, but we don't think about the projects we're not able to complete because of binge watching shows. So try this out. What is a habit that you want to break? Can you visualize the damage that it might cause to your life in 1 year, 5 years, or a lifetime? Now, don't use this as if you don't do it this way, then you'll be a failure forever. That's a negative kind of way to think, and we don't want to do that. We'll talk about the importance of self-compassion later on, but this technique can just as easily be used to course correct out of self-love as out of self-hate. Instead of, I don't want to eat a candy bar every day because I'm going to look horrible, XYZ, that sort of thing. You could say, I don't want to eat a candy bar every day because I want to make sure that my energy is top notch so that I can bring myself fully to the relationships, to the businesses, to the projects, to the things that really matter to me. So just frame it in a self-compassionate way. Our next big idea is about finding what works. While many of the most popular stress relief strategies fail to make us feel better, some strategies really work. According to the American Psychological Association, the most effective stress relief strategies are exercising or playing sports, praying or attending religious services, reading, listening to music, spending time with friends or family, getting a massage, going outside for a walk, meditating or doing yoga, and spending time with a creative hobby. The least effective strategies are gambling, shopping, smoking, drinking, eating, playing video games, surfing the internet and watching TV, or movies for more than 2 hours, of course, the ones that we generally go to. So finding a strategy for coping with stress, the one that works specifically, one that actually works, is a lifesaver. We're going to talk about more why they work in a second. Why does it seem so easy to choose strategies that don't work. The main difference between the strategies that work and the strategies that don't, rather than releasing dopamine and relying on the promise of a reward, the real stress relievers boost mood enhancing brain chemicals like serotonin and GABA, as well as the feel good hormone oxytocin. They also help you shut down the brain's stress response, reduce stress hormones in the body, and induce the healing relaxation response. Because they aren't exciting like the dopamine releasers, we tend to underestimate how good they will make us feel. So these ones down here are more of our dopamine producers. They give us kind of a quick hit of dopamine that makes us feel better in the moment. And these ones up here, they're releasing serotonin, GABA, and oxytocin, long-lasting brain-changing chemicals rather than our quick hit of dopamine that leaves us looking for more. And so we don't forget about these strategies, not because they don't work, but because when we're stressed, our brains persistently mispredict what will make us happy. This means that we'll often talk ourselves out of doing the very thing that will actually make us feel better. So it turns out that our brains are wired to seek dopamine when we're feeling down, stressed, or have to make a decision. Knowing this, we can understand why we might choose the activities that actually end up causing more stress in an effort to reduce it. These activities give us that short-term feel-good hit of dopamine, but they rob us of the long-lasting mood stabilizing and stress reduction effects of things like serotonin, GABA, and oxytocin. So how can we make the right choice in the moment? Step number one is just to know what activities you enjoy that relieve stress in a meaningful and long-lasting way. You can pick from this list or find one of your own, but it's important to know what your stress relievers are. Step number two is know that when you are stressed, you will not want to do those things. You're not going to want to start a yoga session. You're not going to want to start meditating. You're not going to want to get outside, going for a walk when you're stressed out. Know that that will happen. Know that that is the truth. Step number three is if you're in that situation, just get started. This is borrowed from solving the procrastination equation. But just get started. The most important part. Resolve to do an activity for 2 to 5 minutes. 2 to 5 minutes, that's it. Step number four is often that activity starts to capture momentum and go on its own. You get outside and you go for a short walk and you might just want to go for a longer one. You hit a couple of yoga poses and all of a sudden you're half an hour in of stretching. But step number five, if step number four doesn't work out, see the next point in the mind map, right? We can have the tendency to do these things, to get ourselves to do yoga. And then when we don't feel better, if it doesn't gain momentum, if we just don't feel like doing it anymore, we can end up beating ourselves up. And our final point is be nice. If you think that the key to greater willpower is being harder on yourself, you're not alone, but you are wrong. Study after study shows that self-criticism is consistently associated with less motivation, worse self-control. It's also the single biggest predictor of depression, which drains both I will power and I want power. In contrast, self-compassion, being supportive and kind to yourself, especially in the face of stress and failure, is associated with more motivation and better self-control. Consider, for example, a study at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada, that tracked the procrastination of students over an entire semester. Lots of students put off studying for the first exam, but not every student made it a habit. Students who were harder on themselves for procrastination on their first exam were more likely to procrastinate on later exams than students who forgave themselves. The harder they were on themselves about procrastinating the first time, the longer they procrastinated for the next exam. Forgiveness, not guilt, helped them get back on track. So I think that a lot of people that are interested in self-development, coaching clients of mine, entrepreneur friends of mine, myself, think that being hard on ourselves is actually the most motivating thing that we can do. Studies show that we might need to think again about that. Something that I've dealt with again throughout my life with my coaching clients. They bring it up all the time. And I think we're taught this from a young age, so I can't blame them. For reasons we think that for some reason, we think that in order to motivate ourselves, we need to be unhappy about something. Most of us even think that the harder we are on ourselves, the more motivated we'll be. To those people out there and to my previous self, I would say remember a couple of different things. Everybody makes mistakes and experiences setbacks. That we can be sure. How we handle these setbacks matters more than the fact than that they happened. We all have the tendency to believe self-doubt and self-criticism, but listening to this voice never gets us closer to our goals. Instead, try on the point of view of a mentor or a good friend who believes in you, wants the best for you, and will encourage you when you're feeling discouraged. This be your own best friend concept is something that I've been wanting to do a video on for quite a long time. But being your own best friend changed my life. The more you can act as if you're your own best friend, a mentor, a coach, or the more you can have a really good best friend, or have a really good mentor, or have a really good coach, that is going to change your life because you're going to forgive yourself, you're going to be able to learn, and you're going to be able to get back on the field a lot quicker. So you might be thinking, does this mean that we can't hold high standards? This is always the objection that I get, something like that. Does this mean that I can't hold myself to high standards? No. And actually, it's important to hold your high standards. I hold myself to a very high standard. And be nice to ourselves when we fall short. When we fall short. It's 100% likely to happen. Nobody is perfect, and it's very unlikely that you're going to be the first one. But constant self-criticism is a great way to make sure that you continue to do the things that you want to change. You beat yourself up, it stresses you out more, and you go back to those old coping mechanisms that you've been falling back on for your entire life. Then you beat yourself up more, and the cycle continues. Know that you can be self-compassionate, highly motivated, and extremely successful. In fact, it's the easier way to be. For some reason, we've all been trained to be extremely hard on ourselves. I believe that that's going to change over the next decade or two to self-compassion and motivating ourselves through finding big and meaningful goals instead of feeling like we're less than. That was the Willpower Instinct by Kelly McGonigal. I want to thank you for being with me. And I also want to offer you something. If you're here at the end of the video, I'm not going to offer this to everyone, but there is a free coaching session available at a link down in the description. If you go down there and click on that, we can talk about willpower, we can talk about self-compassion, we can talk about exercise, we can talk about pause and plan, we can talk about anything in this video or anything that you're currently struggling with. I would be happy to talk to some of the YouTube audience. I always love getting on calls with you guys, and I look forward to seeing some of you there, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the next video.